Hello, everyone. Today, Data Free Thinkers will be presenting our research on addressing the data discrepancies throughout the prison system. And we would specifically like to thank the Party Rand Graduate School for allowing us to do such a hackathon. Although we had differentiating views and passions and interests, we all found some type of combination around this idea. And we would also like to thank our Party Rand mentors, Catherine Edwards, Karishma Patel, as well as Swaptik Chowdhury for helping us and assisting us and guiding us through this process. Sade.
Sorry, my name is Sade Fisher. I go to Spelman College. My major is physics and I'm originally from Jamaica.
My name is Jalen White. I am a junior psychology major at Morehouse College and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
And hello, my name is Calvin Bell III. I am a sophomore at Morehouse College studying philosophy and political science, and I am from Pensacola, New Jersey. So our purpose. The main reason why we came to this conclusion was through my story. My father was incarcerated throughout my life. He had passions growing up. However, a lot of those things were taken away from him. So he resorted to the streets. And when you have to survive, that has a huge impact on you. And so last year, during COVID-19, my father passed away due to pre-diagnosed conditions, and then ultimately due to a lack of oversight from his correctional officers. And so this is where we come to the conclusion of, did the prison facilities throughout the United States take adequate steps in mitigating the spread of COVID-19, where we'll be evaluating current policy responses, as well as examining the measures taken to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 throughout the United States. And so what did we do? So we took several steps. First, we looked at several different data sets, but primarily the UCLA prison data sets. And this shows us the COVID-19 infections, as well as the mortality rates throughout the states and prisons within these states. Since our central aim was to examine the efficiency of policies introduced for prisons during the pandemic, we needed data sets on these specific policies. And however, national data on compassionate release, which will be a topic that we'll touch on, lack data on demographics, on released persons, as well as updates about these releases. We found that several data reports, however, lack spatial as well as temporal granularity. For instance, nationally, during the month of April 2020, around 3,500 incarcerated persons were being released early. Then following that in July, a lot of these releases were expedited. And so this changed, and this was also an effect for my father not to be released on compassionate release. In May of 2021, it was reported that NBC News, 76,000 incarcerated persons were being given early release credits. However, that list didn't come out and wasn't eligible until July 29th of 2021. And so ultimately, with more data, such as if we knew COVID case rates among those denied compassionate release, we could answer questions such as if compassionate release reduced case counts.
So most facilities put an emphasis on social distancing similar to general populations. Ever since decreased population size included early compassionate release. This data is from the United States Sentencing Commission. It was tracked from December 31st, 2020 to May 27, 2021. The report includes motions that were filed by incarcerated persons. This is just showing that there were various states and specific reasons within them that were doing compassionate release. On average, most of the motions were denied, as you can see. Next slide, please. So with California being among these states, and exploring the data, we found that California has some of the biggest prison populations. The facility prison data The repository also showed that the amount of COVID cases were relatively high, but the amount of deaths were very low. This piqued our curiosity, so we investigated why this could be. The main solution turned out to be implemented by the CDCR, which is the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, was compassionate and early release programs. California has reduced the state population by about 19% in the past 18 months, but it still hasn't prevented multiple COVID outbreaks. To date, 242 deaths and 51,520 COVID-19 cases have been reported in the 35 adult institutions in the UCLA prison data set. The total population is around 122,000 people now. There's an infection rate of 42.3% and mortality rate about 0.2%. Still, the average state prison is at 107% of their design capacity. And so each state kind of in this graphic had their own color bars in the grayscale, but it's difficult to make out. But the green California, I'm showing that California had among the lowest COVID-19 mortality rates throughout the pandemic. Next slide, please. So the total prison population throughout California correctional facilities during the pandemic is slightly north of 90,000, approximately 92,865. The issue is that there's no exact total number of the amount of incarcerated persons that were released during the pandemic. A lot of people who were eligible for release, early release, had some delays and were not officially reported. This includes individuals receiving early release credits and only means that they were being made eligible for early release. According to the California Compassionate Release Report, there were motions filed by incarcerated persons that took place before the big release of April 2020, referring to the data that was tracked from December 31st through May 27, 2021. There's a slight gap because the last list for eligible release came out in late July of 2021. What we would like to see is data timelines that have better overlap, but to do that, there needs to be consistent reporting and tracking consensus of some sort. All this considered, it's difficult to answer the question, did the pandemic increase releases above their normal rate?
So this graph is comparing the percentage of incarcerated persons granted early release out of the total cases to the number of incarcerated persons infected with COVID-19. So we can see that the R-squared is much less than 1. The independent and dependent variables aren't strongly correlated. We could conclude that compassionate release has no real effect in California, but the compassionate release data lacks temporal granularity. We cannot properly track its relationship to COVID-19 mortality rates. So in other words, the aggregate data, which is usually put up by agencies, is not conducive for research. And that is a major concern for data transparency. So we see the same thing here for mortalities. And it actually contradicts the last slide. There's an inverse relationship and the R-squared is strong. So you can see that this data isn't really reliable, or the analysis wouldn't really be reliable because the data isn't very strong. So there's a problem, a lack of data transparency. The resulting analysis was vague and didn't draw any clear connections between prison policies and more specifically compassionate release and COVID-19 infections and mortalities.
And so our 3 different policy recommendations and next steps. One being that in-depth research needs to come about, especially in think tanks such as Party RAND, where there is more enriched data sets that are being released for people like us to be able to present more efficiently on them. 2 being that as a result, policies and standards on how data is shared should be that in which is transparent and established within these think tanks. And 3 being, in addition, that there must be 2 values that are uplooked, one being privacy and the other one being competency in terms of data issues. And so we must consider the way in which data sets are evaluating certain standards, especially when looking at institutions such as the prison system that has varying populations amongst men, women, race, ethnicity, background, socioeconomic status.